What's up, guys? Wanted to have a quick discussion about prepping, if I can, but from a slightly different angle. I actually want to talk a little bit about the differences in preppers and a couple of things that might become relevant here over the next short time, depending on how much you're paying attention to the news and whatnot and all this cyber attack talk. First thing I want to kind of point out is what you're gonna do, especially after maybe a couple of days of having no power, in regards to, say, your neighbors. Because there's a lot of people, and I know, don't tell anybody what you got, don't show anybody what you got. I get it, I do. But if you're a well-prepped person and you've got a neighbor that you know isn't doing well, are you really gonna not lend a hand? Is that really what we're supposed to do? And I get this is a sensitive subject. I suppose when push comes to shove, it depends on the neighbors we're talking about. Hopefully your neighbors are smart enough to think like you if you're prepared, and be prepared themselves. But even then, if both of you are prepared, I can pretty much promise you you're gonna have differences in knowledge that could be shared and could come in handy. Just something to really think about if the time comes. And I hope it doesn't. I'm not saying it's gonna. I'm just throwing this out there just in case, because really it could take communities to get through, depending on how long things happen. Honestly, even if something does happen, I don't think it's going to happen very long. I mean, 3 days of darkness seems to come to mind. That'd be long enough to wake people up, make sure they know who to point the finger at when things come back on, right? Because that seems to be the narrative. You know, make sure we're pointing the finger at so-and-so before things happen. That way, when they come back on, we all know who to blame. And in the meantime, they're doing the same thing to the opposite side. Who's doing it? We won't go into that. How you prep can go a long way in a lot of different ways. Now take me for example. I'm not new to prepping. And if you look at my channel, you'll notice that I do have get stuff on my channel. Make sure you have food, make sure you have battery operated things, or better yet, candles, things that can be used even if all electronics weren't working. You got to kind of make sure you have at least a little bit of all your bases covered, depending on what the situation brings, right? So one thing that I've been looking at a lot is, rather than making sure that I have enough stuff to keep my current way of life going, the more I look at this stuff, the more I realize you're just buying time if things were to happen long term anyway. Ultimately, I believe the best tool, and I've said this many a times, is knowledge. Because if you have the knowledge of how to use natural resources, kind of like, say, how our ancestors did, you're going to be far better off than having a bunch of stuff. Now, does that mean don't have any stuff and just get a bunch of knowledge? Well, not necessarily. Finding a happy medium can be key. But I guess that's why I like things like The Lost Ways. That's a book that you can read, that you could literally make tools from natural resources from that book. Well, if that means you gotta grab some rocks and grab some sticks and start making tools so that you can dig or cut wood or however. I know that's a little drastic, but you kind of see my point. It doesn't matter how much stuff you have. If you get put into a position where you're not where it is when things happen, now what? So again, that goes with having a plan. I highly recommend having a plan. But I also highly recommend going beyond that plan every chance you get to get a little extra knowledge. Looking up how our ancestor did things. You can look it up right here on YouTube. Whether it's looking at how Vikings did things, building Viking houses. I can go all day on prepper channels of people going out in the woods and building shelters by digging holes in the ground, digging out a fire pit even within their shelter by digging it out, and then basically building a chimney out of some clay and rocks, building your roof out of wood, leaves. I suppose what they build it out of depends on the location they are at and the tools they have at hand, which brings me to another point. Where do you live? Well, if you're watching, for example, there's a lot of people in other countries building shelters out of bamboo, which is awesome. I like watching that. Me watching a video on how to build a shelter out of bamboo doesn't do me any good when there's no bamboo anywhere near where I live. So that kind of goes along with prepping or watching people do things that are not necessarily local, but at least familiar. I guess a good example would be I have a book on Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota edibles. They can be found in the wilderness. Right now, that does me a lot of good because I live in that tri-state area. If I lived in Florida, would that be a good book to have? I know that's kind of a stupid point to make, but sometimes it's that obvious. So I hope you're paying attention to what's going on. I hope you're prepping at least a little bit, because there is a lot going on. But on top of that prepping, if you're the type of person who has been prepping for a long time and you're thinking, nah, I'm already good, I've got what I need, use that time that you could be going to get stuff and search different skills on YouTube that you don't already have. If you're not a hunter, maybe look into how to clean animals or how to fix even clothing and stuff. Learning to sew could be a big deal. Having a little medical background would definitely help out a little bit, if you know a little bit about first aid and whatnot, especially. And most importantly, back to your neighbors, if you know you have nurses, doctors, anybody could be helpful. If you have contractors that live local, if you have anybody with certain skills, all of those skills could come in incredibly handy in the right type of situation. And I'm not making this video because I think all hell's about to break loose tomorrow. But I do think we are at the start of what is about to be a very long year. So even if we're just talking inflation, if you went out, bought a handful of things that you use on a regular basis now, if the price increases in a week or a month, at least you had that much more before you had to run out and buy more and it cost you that much more. having stuff can just help you out, guarding against inflation and stuff like that. So I hope this helps, and I hope people are paying attention. So with that said, I'm going to leave this at that and simply say I hope everybody's doing well, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Later, guys.